Welcome to another episode of TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group. Today is Tuesday, April 30th, and we have another great show for you today. As you know, we are in the midst of interviewing all of the candidates for the competitive school committee race, the final in a series where we have interviewed all candidates in townwide competitive races. And today, we have school committee member Sarah Moghtader. Sarah, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Tommy. I appreciate so much how you help all of us participate in the political process in Brookline, and you're so encouraging. So thank you for that.
Well, you're very welcome. I mean, there's Brookline News and League of Women Voters, and lots of folks are trying to help candidates get their message out and explain and help folks understand. And each of the formats are a little different. This is like a 28-minute show, so it's a real opportunity to get to a little bit more under the surface. Before we get into that, I want to remind folks, Tuesday, May 7th, polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., and then you can watch the results show that evening right here on Brookline Interactive Group beginning at 7 p.m., but don't you dare turn the show on until you've already voted. Sarah, we want to start by just getting to know you a little bit. Like, what have you been doing your whole life? What's the Sarah story?
Well, the thing that brought me to school committee is that I've been working in our schools since 2004. I moved back from London, and there was a principal, John Dempsey, who interviewed me to be at the then Devotion School. And so I've been a teacher in our schools, and that's what I've been doing, and bringing up 3 kids.
And so you've been a teacher in the Brookline schools. Tell us a little more about that. That seems like a particularly relevant fact for a school committee race.
So, over the years, people have said to me, are you interested in running for school committee? And I wasn't really too sure how I felt about that. And then I saw the current configuration of the school committee. We've got some really smart people that work really well together. So I left the classroom in June in order to run for a vacancy, and I'll tell you more about that. But my career ended up being, over the course of 20 years, I was in the Brookline schools as a middle school teacher. And, teachers all have their age group that they really like. And my age group is 6 to 8. And I was able to teach at what is now Ridley and Hayes, as well as Runkle and Lawrence. And being in those 4 different schools, I got a real good sense of the town. And that experience has made it possible for me to always participate in the latest conversations about the schools and school issues. And that's what really drives me. I really like to be a part of that conversation about how we're bringing our kids up and how we're keeping our schools real high quality.
And so you were selected to be on the school committee in an unconventional way, right? There was a vacancy, and the current school committee members and the current select board members chose you to serve out the rest of that term. So even though you haven't been elected by the voters yet, you are currently a school committee member, which means you can give us the straight dope. What's going on in the school committee? At least tell us, to begin, how does it behave in a way that maybe you didn't appreciate from the outside, either as a teacher or as a parent? Tell us sort of how the school committee actually gets its work done.
So as I was saying, the 9 of us are people with really different values and different opinions. But when we come together, there's a lot of collaboration between us. What the school committee is able to do, what's under our purview, is we hire and fire the superintendent. So we oversee the superintendent. We vote on the budget, and as well as policy. Those are our 3 big areas that we're able to affect. So in order to explain a little bit more, if you can understand that the educators are the experts that are managing our schools on the day-to-day basis, and kind of like any board that you would be on for a company, it's the same with this organization, that we are the people that govern and lead. So it's the high-level educational conversations that happen between us. And I think that I didn't really appreciate how the superintendent has such a clear view of that, and how he works together with the school committee in order to try to help people figure out where they can apply their skills. So as I came on board, I got a mentor. My mentor has educational experience as well. She was a principal in Boston Public Schools. And I was able to really hit the ground running right away with the things that I care most about. So I joined the finance subcommittee and the capital improvement subcommittee. I really feel like we can put forward our educational values through how we use the budget. That's sort of where we're able to really put our ideas forth. And I found that my experience does help me in those issues, that I'm able to take my knowledge of the schools from having served in them for so long. I also have the relationships from all that time. So, when I go on a school visit, I'm able to see people that I know. I'm affirming relationships that I already have with them. And it's just been sort of it was kind of a quick fit for me to get up and running. I also have a son at Lawrence School, and I think that that's what sort of brings the passion to it. Is as a parent, there's a lot of things that I would really like to see for our students, and I feel that in a very deep way. So one of the things that's super important to me is to use research-based instruction. I've been doing that for years in the way that I face out to other teachers. I've always been a person that, helps bring people along and be their best selves. So what I was able to do as a French teacher is I was able to use the research on how to best teach world language and bring that into my classroom, but also bring that to other teachers. I like to teach to speak at conferences, so I do local and state and national conferences. So in that same way, I've got a son who has dyslexia, and it's been really important to me, the conversations that we've been having about research on reading and how do we bring that into our schools. So I think that those high level conversations that I have with the other school committee members are what brings out what's I'm passionate at, is making the most effective school that I can.
So I want to get into the budget. You gave me that hook a little bit earlier. Of course, the fiscal year begins July 1, which means that the school committee on which you serve has been chewing on the budget for a while now. Can you give us a sense of that budget process and priorities and sort of how that shakes out? Voters know they pay property tax either directly or perhaps through their rent, but they may not know how it is decided that the money gets spent and what are the things you're weighing there. So maybe give us a little bit of an insider view on that.
I feel like this budget cycle, we got better at a few things from what I had heard in the past. In late 2023, we were able to state our priorities. And what I liked about the way that we did that this time is we really kept them priorities, we kept the list short. So, it wasn't like, and another thing, right? But they were really the things to focus on. At the time, when we had gone back to school in the fall, at the high school, there were some very large classes and for the honors science classes. And so we had said that it was a value of ours not to have 30 students in an honors class. We wanted to bring that down. And so those priorities get brought into the conversation, and we have somebody at the schools. We have a new director of finance who wrote a budget, and the budget was so readable. That's really all on her, not on the school committee. She made a budget that when I was looking through the numbers, as I was looking at things, the commentary was there for the questions that I had. And so it's nice for parents and community to know that all of that gets put out there on the web, and you can read the budget yourself next time around and sort of see that commentary. So then after that had happened, we had all of the issues that all of the programs that we usually fund, and we had some increasing expenses. So this is the point at which the school committee gets involved in the conversation, because there were a few things that we were going to need to relinquish that we had funded in the past in order to keep up with these increasing costs. So like our utilities are more expensive right now. We've seen out of district placement, the schools, we don't have increased numbers there, but we have the price tag on that has gotten more expensive. And then we do have some students that we can serve better for special ed needs at different schools. Brookline doesn't do transportation, but if you have one of our K-8 schools that your child needs to go to for special ed, there's transportation, and that transportation cost had gone up. So among a couple of other things. So there are going to need to be some things. It wasn't a budget cut. Our budget, in fact, grew from, it grows over the years from what it had been in the past. But it was that we had some new expenses and things were getting more expensive. And so we needed to relinquish some of what we weren't able to do anymore. So the process to me felt really good because it was the 10 principals, the 9 principals, the 8 K-8 schools and the high school. They got together with teaching and learning and director of finance, and they made their priorities. And then they came to present those to us. And so that's to give you a sense of kind of like the governance piece, is that's where we came in as school committee members to ask the questions. And, if you're a community member and you want to see how this goes, all of our meetings from open meeting law are there for you to watch. And so during that process, we were able to sort of overlay our values to what they were saying. And for this cycle, we were able to agree with the educators and promote the decisions the things that they wanted to relinquish. Some of that was really hard for me personally, because of course you want to do everything you can possibly do, but a budget is such that the town communicates a number to us, and we have to meet that number. We have to balance the budget to meet that number. So in order to make efficiently run schools, there were a few things that we had to relinquish in order to make that work.
And maybe you could sort of fill in the blank. I know there was conversation about the world language program for younger students being a thing that may not have given us enough bang for the buck. Are there other things on that list?
And there was also the literacy coaches. So what we kept, it's important to know that literacy coaches teach the teachers and literacy specialists teach the students. So the literacy coaches, a few of them were let go as a part of that.
Now, we're bouncing around a bit, as my show often does. I want to sort of jump on to something that I know you've talked about in the past, and that is sort of modern, proven out teaching methods, right? Something that as a teacher, maybe you've thought about a little bit more carefully than some others. And I know you've talked about it on the campaign trail a bit. Flesh that out a little bit, particularly as it relates to reading. Folks have read in the Globe and other places, the science of teaching people how to read has evolved our understanding. We've evolved in our understanding. Tell us more about that and maybe how you, if you're elected to the school committee, will bring that on board.
So that is something that we've already actually made some gains in Brookline. But let me answer your question exactly as you asked it. So all students learn best from structured literacy. And what that is teaching phonetics and teaching kids the sounds so they can sound out the words. It also is making sure that we increase students' vocabulary by having texts that build at the right developmental level. So when you reach 3rd grade, you've done some rigorous, reading in 2nd grade that leads you to have the vocabulary that you need for 3rd grade. So those components that make up structured literacy is sort of what that new science is. And that's what's referred to in those Globe articles. And like other communities around Massachusetts, we weren't using that approach. And so sort of the alarm was sounded. And this is something that I feel very strongly, in my own family, as I referred to before. And so it's a matter about making sure that our instruction is following that research that's come out on reading. And we did a review, and the review is coming out in June, and we'll be sort of looking at how we've been approaching reading in our schools. And our excellent practitioners, our teachers who have been teaching reading and the reading specialists have been kind of taking from different sources over the years. They have their ways of teaching reading that use different resources to the best that they're able to do. By purchasing a new program and getting the training that will be put in place over the summer for the teachers, we're now going to be able to follow the science. And so this is something that's new to us, new to a lot of communities around, and different communities have had to figure out how to respond to it. So that's been something that I feel very proud of, that the school committee has been in partnership with the schools, a change that we've been able to make. overall, that is what you want to see when you're on school committee, is you want to make sure that the teaching uses the most up-to-date research in terms of how learning happens. So for me, this is one example, and in further work for us to do to make sure that we're using research-based practices in our schools.
So clearly this science is not unique to Pierce School or FRR, right? Or Baker School. This is true amongst young people, at least learning the English language, perhaps even all languages.
All languages, yeah.
And so I wonder, I'm a Pierce dad, and I've spent a little bit of time in other schools. I know that there are some differences in culture and style amongst the schools. Having taught at 4 of them, you might be perhaps the best suited to sort of give us a little bit of a rundown about what are some things that are different, and frankly, why that's okay.
So the communities are different at each place. I never taught at Pierce, but one of the things that I've loved about Pierce is, with the challenging building that wasn't, necessarily serving us anymore, the Pierce community of parents were just so loyal to the school and loved their school. And, it was just always a pleasure to talk to somebody who had kids at Pierce, because there was just a lot of enthusiasm for the community. And, you have your events at your school that you're really attached to. And at Lawrence, where my son is, we have different events, right? And so the community is really what sort of makes the difference. And I know you would think that within Brookline, we're not that diverse between one community to the other. So the principals are always responding to exactly the community that's in front of them. And the principals have different styles too. You have a great principal that knows her community well at the Pierce School. And so what's been interesting is teachers in Brookline have always spoken about how they love to teach in Brookline. But the Brookline is a place that attracts great teachers. And one of the things that you hear them refer to again and again is the autonomy that they were able to have, in their teaching. So I think that for the public, it's really good to try to explain the difference between the autonomy that a teacher gets and that sort of standard experience that you want our K-8s to have, and like each student to have that they arrive to the high school with, that they've had this background that brings them to the same place. And that's sort of the equity piece. So one of the things that I'd like to see going forward in our K-8s is to have a real sequenced, standardized curriculum that brings a student in English, math, science, and social studies through K-8, so that they're arriving at the same place in the high school. But that doesn't mean that the teacher doesn't have that autonomy to teach. The different schools can run themselves differently, and the teacher can run her classroom in a way that corresponds to her interests and her passions, if we have these strong curriculums that we all know that we're teaching. There's a lot of great learning that goes on between teachers across the town. We have a meeting schedule so that we have some weeks it's a staff meeting, some weeks it's a department meeting. When our teachers come together, they share what's going on in their classroom in a way that they can take the best ideas, the best practices, and share them with other people. Sometimes maybe you hear us talk about professional development. And we've done a lot with teacher leading, with teacher modeling, and making sure that the professional development is a time when there's not just one teacher of the group that's always dictating that learning, but that there's a sharing of that leadership. And so there might be one time that one teacher is showing off their best practice, and then the next time another one. So you can sort of understand how this pieces together buildings that are teaching the students the same thing while giving that different response to the community that works for that particular community, that works for the teachers, that works for the students that are in front of that teacher.
I love it. So I want to pivot a little bit. I'm a campaign animal, and I know that actually this is your first townwide campaign. Start with, like, not just how it's going, but do you feel like you've been able to really express your priorities clearly? Do you feel like you're able to communicate to voters what are the things that you bring and what are your priorities?
I have loved the response that I've gotten to my campaign, and that's what's been encouraged me to get the word out even more. So the part of this that was new to me were not the ideas behind this, right, and the experience that I brought to it. I really feel very confident on the school committee and able to serve currently. So the part that was new was how to get the message out there of my understanding. And so there's been, I think, sort of four different ways that that you start to have those conversations. So the first thing, and this does all go back to you, Tommy. You kind of set me on the road in the right direction. Is there's a lot of conversations early on with Brookline officials, with town meeting members, school committee members, select board members, and I really loved those conversations. I was able to talk to people about what their priorities were, and I got quite a few endorsements along the way. So that was kind of my first step. Then what started to happen was the people in the community. So I've had, 4 different house parties, and I love coming together in a circle at somebody's house and having a conversation and hearing from people who have kids in the schools or people who are invested in our schools for other reasons. A lot of us care deeply about education, even if we don't have kids in the schools anymore, or even if we never had kids in the schools. And so those conversations are right up my alley. They're the ones where it's like the high level education issues, and I love having those. So that was kind of the second way. And then now we're into the season where we've been having candidate forums. So the candidate forums are each have their different personality. Do you want to know what your school committee members think about biking in Brookline? Do you want to know how they're attempting to combat anti-Semitism? Each group that brings together the candidate panel has their particular thing. So then that guides that conversation and makes that conversation that much more interesting. So I will be, hopefully, if I get elected to school committee, serving along some of these candidates. There's 3 openings right now. And so I'm getting to know those people that, might be alongside me when I serve. And then there's been the canvassing door to door. And we have a lot of cool people in Brookline, and some of them you just meet by getting yourself out there and talking to voters and asking them about what they're looking for in a candidate. So that part is not like as much me as it is you, but it's been a great way for me to show the part that is my forte, which is speaking about the educational issues.
I'm sure you've got a website, and I'm sure you're going to tell us what it is.
My website is Moghtader Moghtader4Brookline.com, no punctuation. And I'd love for you to go to it to see my bio, my priorities, and my endorsements.
And, so it sounds like, I remember I spoke with you early in the campaign. For the sake of the viewers, I speak with every townwide candidate at the beginning of the campaign and offer, anything I can do to be helpful, because I think that when candidates are at their best, the voters have the best chance at figuring out who's their best fit for them. And so I know when we spoke initially, you weren't overwhelmed, but you were sort of acknowledging that, wow, there's a lot of things about a campaign that maybe I haven't done before quite this way. Do you feel like you kind of got your feet under you? You feel like it's been maybe a little bit of a rocky ride, but you're smooth sailing at this point?
Yeah, and I think that the piece that I have heard about again and again is that people want government that functions together, where people know how to collaborate and work with others. And they're not trying to sort of show off themselves of like, I got you. I asked the most burning question, but they want people that are able to do the work. And that's something that we hear again and again. And so I guess by being on the campaign, I found that the part that is my forte is the part that people are looking for, and that made the campaigning a lot easier.
That's great. That's great. And folks, as you know, May 7th, Tuesday, May 7th, it's not too far. It's a week and a half from now. And there's early voting, there's mail-in voting. You can go to town hall and vote. all of that's available on the town clerk website. Get all those details there. And of course, you can vote on election day. Polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. You can go to wheredoivotema.com and that will show you where to vote. You can even go to tommyvitolo.com/vote, and that's got some basic information there as well. And just to remind you, as Sarah referenced earlier, you get 3 votes for school committee. There are 4 candidates. Now, you don't have to vote all 3. You could vote fewer than that, but 3 folks are going to win. And the school committee is spending roughly, what, 60% of the town's budget? Is that about right? So this is the real stuff. This is how the town is expending a substantial amount of our resources. The school committee members are the ones, they don't get to decide how big the check is. That's town meeting, but the school committee decides how to spend that money and where that breakdown goes. So this is the good stuff. Again, Tuesday, May 7th is the election. Polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. The elections results show begins at 7 p.m. right here on Brookline Interactive. Sarah, any final thoughts? Any last minute pitch? We got about 2 minutes. I'm happy to hear from you.
Well, I think that what brings together everything that I do for the school committee is this idea that every child that walks into our buildings is our kid. So we want to make sure that we are making every student feel like they belong, making sure that the curriculum suits them and they're getting what they need. And so my slogan is teach every kid.
Sarah, thanks so much for coming on the show. Sarah Moghtader, folks, we'll be back on the air in 2 days. Every Tuesday, every Thursday, we've been doing this. We want to make sure you've got the opportunity to hear from all the candidates. If you missed an episode in the past, you can get it on the brooklineinteractive.org website or the tommyvitolo.com/news website. You'll also be able to see this interview maybe in a day once we get it online, and you can watch it again and again and again. Sarah, thanks so much for spending some time with us here on Brookline Interactive.
Thank you, Tommy.
And folks, like I said, we will see you 2 days from now for our final school committee conversation before the election. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.